Call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. This is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. My name is Laura Lee Nicol. I'm the chair of the committee. Before we start, I remind everyone to keep your phones on silent, and should there be a need to leave the building, we'll exit through the doors on Granville Street and gather at the Grand Parade. So now we'll ask the committee members to introduce themselves, starting with my left.
Morning, everyone. Nolan Young, MLA, Shelburne.
Good morning and welcome. Tom Taggart, MLA for Colchester North.
Good morning. John A. McDonald, MLA for Hants East.
Good morning. Welcome. Melissa Sheehy-Richard. I'm the MLA for Hants West.
Good morning. Claudia Gender, MLA for Dartmouth South.
Lisa LaChance, MLA for Halifax, Little Sable Island.
Good morning. Marco McLeod, MLA Pictou West.
Thank you. And on my left, we have from the Legislative Council.
Gordon Hebb, Counsel to the Committee.
And on my right from the committee clerk is
Kim Landell.
And remind everyone that we have officials from the Auditor General here with us in attendance, as always, as advisors to the committee should they have any questions. So on today's agenda, we have officials with us, as we see before us, from the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing with respect to government measures addressing housing. And I'll ask our witnesses to introduce themselves, starting on the left.
Good morning. Michelle Waye, Executive Director, Housing Programs and Services.
Good morning. Hardy Stuckless, Executive Director, Municipal Infrastructure and Finance.
Good morning. Byron, Rafuse, Deputy Minister, Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Good morning. Kathy Cox-Brown, Project Executive for the Rent Supplement Program.
Yes, good morning. Brian Ward, Executive Director of Operations, Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency.
So good morning, everyone, and we'll start with Deputy Minister Rafuse with his opening remarks.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us here today to talk about government measures addressing housing. Chair, I understand the committee is interested in learning about what we're doing to address the housing crisis and how we are helping more Nova Scotians access housing across the spectrum. My colleagues and I will do our best together to answer your questions. Chair, we've had the opportunity to be here with the committee several times over the last year or so, and we've always appreciated the opportunity to bring forward an update on the important work and measures being undertaken to improve and enhance housing. Chair, as you may know, we've created a strong, clear housing plan with solid data and backed by historic investments that will help create an environment for an additional 41,200 units over the next 5 years. It's been about a year since we launched our plan, and we've already seen significant progress. For example, Nova Scotia housing stocks has increased by 4,600 units, and the housing starts are up 48.4% year-to-date this year. We are pleased to see this progress, but we know there's more work to do, and we know we can't fix this crisis alone. That is why we are working very closely with our municipal, federal, and community partners to ensure that we can support as many people and families as possible to find a home. One way that we're doing that in partnership with HRM is through the Executive Panel on Housing in HRM, the HRM Task Force, which is focused on solutions to address the housing crisis here in Halifax. Through the panel's work, we've been able to unlock over 40,000 housing units, creating more supply faster. In the last couple of weeks alone, you may have seen some significant announcements on affordable and deeply affordable housing with our partners in community and other levels of governments, including municipalities. A few examples are the investments of all three levels of governments and community, totaling over $12 million in 32 new affordable homes for women and children in the Mount Hope neighborhood in Dartmouth. Residents will also have access to wraparound services tailored to meet their needs around mental health, health care, and employment services. Another example is our partnership with the Antigonish Affordable Housing Society and their new development at 19 Appleseed Drive. This will feature 17 affordable units, including 4 barrier-free units. This is a partnership under our Land for Housing program, which has unlocked the potential for 1,000 units, including more than 430 affordable units in the areas across the province. Work is happening across the housing spectrum to help Nova Scotians. For the first time since the 1990s, the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency is building 273 new public housing units that will help over 700 people. We've increased our investment in our home repair programs and helped more than 2,250 Nova Scotians, including many seniors. The investment in the community housing sector has increased tenfold, with over $120 million invested in the last 2 years, increasing the number of households supported by 175%. The Community Housing Acquisition Program, or CHAP as we call it, has helped preserve 483 affordable units, including 187 supportive housing units. Many of these units are here in HRM. Chair, we've increased our investment in the first-time homebuyers program from $400,000 to over $4 million, making it easier for people to buy their first home. We've also made changes to that program 3 times in the last few years to improve and increase access and eligibility so more people and families can apply. Chair, we quadrupled our investment in the rent supplement program to $69 million annually, aiming to assist 9,500 households this year. And we're also partnering with Nova Scotia homeowners to increase our housing and affordable housing stock. Chair, I am proud to say that through programs like the secondary and backyard suite programs and Happy Pad, we're able to connect hundreds of Nova Scotians to housing faster. These are just a few examples of how we are working with our partners at all levels to address the housing crisis and connect as many Nova Scotians as possible to a home. Chair, before I conclude, I want to touch on another important topic that I know the committee has expressed interest in, and that is infrastructure. Chair, my department understands the importance of improved infrastructure for our municipalities and communities. We know that in order to address the housing crisis, we need strong, improved, sustainable water and wastewater infrastructure. Most times they go hand in hand. Chair, over the past few months, you may have noticed the department was busy telling the Nova Scotians about the Municipal Capital Growth Program, which is a $102 million provincial investment to enhance infrastructure in municipalities across the province. I would note, too, that that's also matched with investments from municipalities. This program alone will result in replacing and extending 25 kilometers of water and wastewater pipe, reducing flood risking in 638 properties, building 7 kilometers of new improved sidewalks and trails, and enabling the development of close to 7,000 new housing units. On top of the MCGP, we have programs like ISIP, Investment in Canada Infrastructure Program, which is a $2 billion investment from all levels of governments, which will see hundreds of infrastructure projects roll out across Nova Scotia until 2033. Just a couple of months ago, we announced our role in the Canadian Community Buildings Fund with the federal government, which will see on order of about $60 million plus for infrastructure programs to flow to our municipalities each year for the next 10 years. And Chair, through the newly negotiated service exchange agreement, we've committed a $15 million annual program to assist municipalities in their infrastructure needs. The details of that program for this year are being worked on now, and we'll have something very soon to say about that. Chair, in short, we know our municipalities need help, and we have proven our commitment to leveraging and investing dollars available to support our communities now and to the future. And we will continue to do so on the infrastructure front and on the housing front. Chair, I conclude by saying I know everybody in this room shares the department's vision for a strong Nova Scotia with a housing sector that supports many people and families as soon as possible. Thank you, and we are happy to take your questions.
Thank you for your opening remarks, Deputy Rafuse, and we will go and start the first round of questions with the Liberal Caucus, and I acknowledge MLA Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Apologies for being a couple minutes behind this morning. But I wanted to touch on something first that's been in the news over the last 48 hours or so, and that's some changes that the province announced recently to the minimum planning requirements for HRM. Now, some of those I agree with, and I think are good changes. I think the elimination of minimum parking requirements is actually a really good one that is kind of underrated and will help. And obviously the focus on housing and developing housing, I think, makes sense too. But there's two things I wanted to ask about specifically. And Deputy Rafuse, I'll direct them to you, and then if you want to stick a handle them beyond that. But the changes to unit mix requirements, which basically means, you need to have X number of 1, X number of 2, X number of 3 bedroom apartments in any given building, that has been eliminated. And I'm wondering why, because it's good to have a mix of bedroom sizes, so you can have bigger families, for example, in a building. And the other change is to eliminate the requirement to have at least 20% or 20% ground floor commercial, which again, to me, is a good thing, because if you have, if there's a corner store on the bottom of your building, you don't need to get in your car and drive to pick up milk, or if there's a great restaurant at the bottom, you can do that rather than drive and walk around the neighborhood, which I think we all agree is a good thing. So for those two particular changes, unit mix and ground floor commercial, why were those changes made from the province's perspective? How does that help deal with the housing crisis, I guess?
Deputy Rafuse.
Good morning. So, yes, most people realize these changes for minimal planning standards were addressed at HRM Council yesterday. I can tell you this, that those changes were the result of the panel's deliberations on the, as you know, the task force panel has representation from both the province and HRM, and has professional consultants providing them support. As HRM was going through its half amendments, its Housing Accelerator Fund amendments, which they passed over the summer months, where there were a tremendous amount of progressive changes made. The panel deliberations concluded that there were some additional changes that are warranted. And on the recommendation of the panel, the minister recognized that and approved these bylaws and requested the HRM pass that. As far as the changes of the two specific ones you mentioned, the housing mix one, it's really an element as to not to list some restrictions to allow development to proceed as the market allows. I agree with you. There is a need for all 3 units, but to require that has some limitations. Likewise, with the commercial on the ground floor aspect of it, is really our focus is on housing. And not the elements of a commercial operation, so that's really cool why that was submitted.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, as I said in my first question, I agree that housing, should be, in many cases, kind of the predominant concern. But you also want to have communities that are walkable and livable, and people like to have, I think, commercial ground floor. So I don't quite understand that. And the unit mix, I understand it is a requirement. It is, if you wanted to call it red tape, although I don't think that's the right term. But if developers have the option to kind of use whatever mix they want, my assumption might be that they would build predominantly, a vast majority, bachelor and 1 bedroom, because you can get more units into the same amount of space, because they're obviously smaller than a 3-bedroom. So I just wanted to lay that out there, because I think those are changes that I don't quite see the rationale for. You mentioned the executive panel, which is important. So special planning areas have been a topic of interest ever since they've been introduced. There's 3 of them in my riding alone. I know other members here have them in their ridings as well. And what's always kind of confused me about it is the minister has said repeatedly when we've asked about these special planning areas that they will follow all the applicable rules and regulations and studies and planning that go on already in HRM and have been going on for a while. And yet the minister has also made the argument that the special planning areas are building housing faster. So how can both of those things be true? If the department is following all the existing steps that HRM has for these special planning areas, how is it also true that they're being built faster if you're just following the rules that have been in place?
Deputy Rafuse.
Before I get to that, I was remiss in mentioning the answer to your first question around the commercial properties and the removal of that. If you look at the commercial vacancy rate right now in Halifax. It's quite substantial, and that was one of the driving forces which led as to why to remove that requirement, because there is compared to residential units, there is a fair amount of commercial space available, and quite frankly, if there is a market for something in the neighborhood, it will develop on its own as opposed to a requirement. It's true, there's been a number of special planning areas that have been announced, several in your area. And one thing to note with that is, yes, they do have to follow all the same rules. It's not a free pass. But what it does do, and if you look at the time it takes, it's always been, quite frankly to me, quite astounding, the length of time from project conception to an occupancy permit, the length of time it did take. You're talking not 2 or 3 years, you're talking several years. So what to go through all the steps. So what the panel of work has done, what the legislative changes have done, has shortened that time frame. And the designation of special planning areas has removed, depending on the area, anywhere from a low of 3 months to up to 15 months out of the process. And what that allows to do to like expedite some of those processes, it doesn't mean that they don't have to do their certain studies. It doesn't mean they don't have they get a free pass to a development agreement. That doesn't mean they have to follow all the building codes and environmental standards. It just expedites the process. And when we can expedite the process, housing will be built faster, and it does reduce the cost for that developer, because time is money in these things. And so if you can shorten the process, housing becomes more available, and it becomes a more viable option for the developer to proceed.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree in the sense that, sometimes it is shocking how long things can take. Maybe we should be used to that in government. We shouldn't be, but sometimes it does. And so I take that point, and I think we do need to be more efficient on housing development in general. And you said 3 to 15 months for kind of the range of time shaved off. So how, I guess, would be my question. Like, could you give me an example of what the special planning area process has done to take 3 months or 9 months or 15 months off a process? What specific things happen through the executive panel that weren't happening before that are allowing housing to get built faster? And as you say, time is money in that sense. So if you just have something like a good example of how that time has been cut down.
Deputy Rafuse.
So I don't sit on the panel, so I don't know their deliberations. But what it does is that it expedites the process so that a lot of times it will remove things that are and within the planning department of HRMs, which are hard to address. It gets them through that process faster. It does allow things to be advanced further with ministerial approval as opposed to waiting for council approval. Those are the elements of which it does allow things to go faster. It does remove some uncertainty for the developer and for the area. So those are the types of, I will get back to you on specific examples on specific SPAs is probably the best way of doing that. Saying this SPA, this step took out this many months. I just don't have that in front of me, but it does expedite the process, and I would say to you that both HRM and the development community would agree with that.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would appreciate that, Deputy. So thank you for that offer there on the examples. And you touched on another topic in your opening comments I wanted to ask about, which is the secondary suite program. As we know, eligibility has gone from 25 to 40,000 recently. Anecdotally, I still hear stories about complexity and difficulty and so on. So could you just give us an update on how many applications there have been for that program and how many loans have been approved, whatever the most recent reporting period might be, if we have that at hand?
Deputy Rafuse.
Before I hand it off to Michelle to speak further than that, yes, It is an exceptional program which has shown great progress. We've made some changes to it. I just want to make a point of clarity that has led to some comments around the program. It's not meant to cover the entire cost of your backyard suite or your secondary suite. It is help you. It's to help you to advance on that, and it helps you to provide it on an affordable basis. There are some difficulties in it. We've removed some of those challenges within the department. Like in the last changes, you don't need to submit your drawings and plans to us. There are still some challenges in some areas of the province from a municipal bylaw perspective that as a challenge for backyard suites, and we're working with those municipalities to progress that so they are more accommodating on this notion. This is a really expedited way in which additional units can be provided. I'm going to ask Michelle to provide some stats on the program itself.
Executive Director Waye.
Thank you very much. Yes, as Deputy Rafuse said, Secondary Suites program is it's newer, and it's actually one of our most popular programs, I would say. We're getting quite a lot of interest. Within the first few months that it was open, we had up to 300 inquiries within the first month. The first year that it was operational, it opened last November, so halfway through last fiscal, say. We had approved at the end of last fiscal 26 applications, and this was before we did the changes in the fall where we increased the amounts and reduced some of the administrative burden. So to date in 24-25, we've approved 191 applications, and that equals about $7.5 million. So we're seeing a lot of interest in this program throughout the province.
MLA Clark.
Thank you for that. And so if you've approved 191 applications, do we know how many suites have been built and are occupied by people at this point in time? Do we have that data?
Executive Director Waye.
My apologies. Thank you for the question. We do not have the specifics, but we do know it's early in the program, so it does take a while for these units to be built. I can get back to you with the exact number, but I'm thinking that 1 or 2 suites have been completed so far, but I will get back to you.
MLA Clark.
And just so I understand, that data, as they are completed, that data does get routed back to the department in some way, shape, or form? It doesn't just kind of sit with the municipalities, I assume?
Executive Director Waye.
Yes, you are correct. It does get rerouted back to the department because we issue final payment when the municipal approvals have been complete.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump back to special planning areas for a second, Deputy, if I could, because you mentioned earlier that you don't sit on the panel, and so therefore you might not have the blow-by-blow decision-making process, and I appreciate that. But one thing that's kind of troubled me a bit about the special planning area and the executive panel is it's a bit opaque, to be kind, maybe. But I think there's vague minutes, and there's a website, and it's not as updated as frequently as perhaps I would like. So what, from the department's perspective, is the department comfortable with the level of transparency and decision-making around that? And if so, why? Because obviously those decisions are huge decisions to, for example, I think there's 10 or 11,000 units potentially in my riding alone that could be built through the special planning area process. That's tens and tens of millions of dollars of investment. And I don't see a lot of rationale, I guess, or decision-making process. So is the department comfortable with the level of transparency around the executive panel? And if so, why? If yes, why?
Deputy Rafuse.
Yes, I am quite comfortable with their decision-making process. And to give you some insight into that, I do realize that their minutes can be a little opaque, I think is the word you used, and that's for a very good reason. The panel makes recommendations to the minister. the panel decisions are such so that the minister can accept those or not. So it would be very inappropriate for someone to see in the minutes that something was approved and not approved and didn't ultimately make it through the rest of the process. There is a robust screening grid used by the panel members as applications are put through that process. There's a scoring grid on several factors and used, and that scoring grid has evolved over time as the panel has tried to address other things. Case in point, I think for a while, not a lot of consideration was given as to how long an application was in the pipeline in HRM. And recently they decided rather that that's a good criteria to use. The things that have been sitting there longer than others, maybe that should be a higher score. So there is a scoring grid. The scoring grid are maintained. They are confidential. And panel members individually vote. And the vote is recorded. And then a decision is made and a recommendation made to the minister.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Deputy. And I think I could be wrong, but I think when the special planning area process was first announced, there might have been 9 or 10 sites, if memory serves, somewhere around there. How many in total have been approved thus far, and how many applications, I guess, has the executive panel received from developers or companies who might be looking to have their project be deemed an SPA? So how many approved at the moment today, and how many applications has the panel received in total?
Deputy Rafuse.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Right to date, there has been 15 special planning areas that have unlocked 46,000 housing units. And as I said earlier, I actually understated the amount of time they saved. Actually, these special planning units saved between 3 and 24 months that otherwise would have been in the case. So there have been, in addition to those 15, 7 of them have reached their have development agreements reached, which is the secondary part. And construction has started on 6 of them. And those would be Indigo Shores, Penhorn, Bedford 10, Bedford 12, and 1. Port Wallace, and as we spoke of earlier, Mount Hope, sorry.
MLA Clark, with a few minutes left.
How many, sorry?
1.
1 minute, okay. It's good hand signal there, yeah. Okay, so in that case, so 15 approved, 7 DAs, 6 under construction. I take that. So how many applications, I guess, have been received? So 15 have been approved. How many applications in total has the panel received since it was created?
Deputy Rafuse.
That's information I have to get back to you with. I'm not sure how many are actually at the panel site right now, or what stage they are in that. So I would get back to you on that, because that's an ongoing process where the development community will either decide to submit something to the panel or not. But I don't have that with me.
MLA Clark with 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I take it then to mean that there are some number of applications currently under consideration by the panel for status. Is that right?
Deputy Rafuse.
Yeah, the panel works continues on. They have actually are now working on their, as you know, they have a legislative timeline. And they're currently working on their work plan for the next remaining years on that, and including in that would be the intake of additional ones and some additional work that they were undertaking beyond just declaring special planning areas.
Thank you. We will now move for the next 20 minutes to the NDP Caucus, and it's MLA Shender.
Good morning. Interesting conversation so far. I will get to some questions about special planning areas, since I think MLA Clark and I really have the lion's share of those ones you just listed. But what I want to talk about is affordable housing. And I say that word knowing that it has no definition. And so I guess my first question is, how does this department define affordable? And how many units of whatever that definition is do we think will be established in the 5-year plan covered by the housing plan?
Deputy Rafuse.
You're right. There is several definitions of affordable, and we in fact use several in the department depending on the program that it's we're speaking to. Broadly speaking, and I'm going to ask Michelle to weigh into this a little bit afterwards, is that our program that we have to construct new affordable units. There's other ones that maintain affordable units, like the acquisition program, and also our ability to upgrade existing ones, but those don't enhance. I think you're talking about when we build new ones. Is that our primary objective there is to have the units constructed so that the rental markets, we don't have a affordable home ownership program yet, that the rental units can come to the market at least 80% of the area market rate, and there has to be a minimum of at least 20% of the units in that particular building maintained as an affordable rate for a minimum of 20 years. Most of our ones that we work with, particularly with our community partners, the affordability percentage is much higher than that, and also the rate is substantially below the 80% mark. But that's generally it. I'm going to ask Michelle maybe just can you expand on that a bit for me? Thank you.
Executive Director Waye.
Thank you. So yes, there's a variety of different programs that we have to support affordable housing development. The key one, of course, is Affordable Housing Development Program. And since 2022-23, we've committed over $81 million, and that has resulted in 597 units, and 466, or 78% of those are defined as affordable housing units. So far this year, we've committed $14 million towards 9 new projects that have been approved. And out of those, there'll be 128 units, and 83% will be owned by the community housing sector, which in itself affords sort of indefinite affordability with their projects.
MLA Chender.
Thank you. So affordability is defined by this government in public housing as rent geared to income, so 30%. That's a very standard measure. I'll note that by some watchers, rents went up 18.2% last year, which would mean that sort of covers that gap, right? 20% of market. So I think in my area, 20% of market is just categorically not affordable for anyone who is at all feeling pinched at the end of the month and isn't a high income earner, which is the majority of Nova Scotians. So I guess I want to ask, given those numbers, and as you point out, Ms. Waye, I think the community housing sector is offering that indefinite affordability, is offering that deeply affordable measure that we're looking for. Why won't the department consider actually defining affordability as rent geared to income? For some, that might be 80% of market rent. But for those who need it, you're actually creating something that is, by definition, affordable. Whereas, as I point out, 20% below market rent, depending on what the market is, which at the moment seems to be pretty decoupled from incomes in this province, isn't actually affordable. Is there a reason why there's been a resistance to adopt that more standard measure of affordability?
Deputy Rafuse.
You're correct. We have adopted that model in our public housing. It is considered by most, I'm going to call the gold standard, and that model works well with public housing. When you look at even at market or even community housing, that model becomes more difficult. I'll start with market. The cost of construction right now is quite high. And if we were to move to a model, and I'm going to call it with our market partners, where we insisted on the affordability to be 30% of income, and I'm assuming you mean 30% of income for folks that are under hills, because really that's the target group that we want to address on affordability, is those lower income folks. It would become prohibitively expensive, and probably I would suggest to you that most private developers wouldn't partake in that. So, and so therefore you've lost the opportunity to make some of the units at least below market. Likewise with our community partners. Some of them do choose to go to a rent geared to income model. That's the model they've chosen, and they can work within that. But again, it does take a considerable amount of investment to make that under new construction, given the cost. And the average cost right now for an apartment building is around $450,000 per door. And if you extrapolate that out to a monthly rent, it is quite prohibitive in some markets. But we do strive, as I said, our housing plan is to address elements across the continuum. And some of that is market, some of that is affordable, and some of it is deeply affordable. And we will intervene in each of those markets as we can, with the objective is to increase supply. Our studies and the evidence has shown that in the long run, the supply is what will drive the market to a more affordable area, and it will address the housing need faster. So that's one of the reasons why we won't adopt that in all areas, but it is a model which works in certain circumstances.
MLA Chender.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. The private sector isn't going to take that on. And I think that this is the point that we've been trying to make. The community housing sector will take that on. They're not looking to profit. Their time horizon on recovering that $450,000 per door is much longer than the private sector. And so if you take that profit motive out, you have much more possibility, I would suggest. I think we're not just looking at people under hills. I mean, we talk all the time to young professionals, two-income young professionals often. They're being asked to spend $2,500 a month on a two-bedroom apartment. We don't have incomes that support that in this province, particularly if they want to start a family, particularly if they want to save to buy a home. And so I would suggest that for folks like that, the rent geared to income isn't going to be necessarily prohibitive. But I also want to talk about, again, what you raised, which is, the private sector might not participate. Well, I would suggest that they might participate in partnership, and that's what we've seen at Mount Hope. And so I want to ask a question about that, because I think Mount Hope is a great example. So this government announced one fiscal year end in March that they were going to offer a $22 million forgivable loan, I think was the instrument, to a large developer to create affordable housing. And after lots of silence and some mixed messages when we inquired with the department about it, we were told that the developer walked away. They said, we don't want it. $22 million, no thanks. We're not in the business of building affordable housing. And most developers that I've spoken to in this province would say the same thing. It's not in our business, which is what you just said, Deputy. And so then the question becomes, well, how do we get it built? And so in that same development, as you mentioned in your opening comments, we now have 32 units that were built in partnership between the YWCA and Shaw. I mean, Shaw built them and the YWCA acquired them. The provincial investment in that was $2.9 million, I think, a fraction of the money that was turned down by a developer, and we now have families living in those units at affordable, deeply affordable prices. And so my question is, why isn't that the emphasis of the work of the department? Because in partnership, that will happen. This flexible affordability that's offered to private sector developers, I would suggest it's not going to work. And so my question is, how many more projects like that project at Mount Hope that was ultimately successful are in the pipeline? And more specifically, what is the other $19 million that was originally allocated to that project being deployed for at the moment?
Deputy Rafuse.
For clarity, the program in which private developers tap into and the community housing sector is the same program. It is available to both. And we do work with community housing partners, and they do have the ability through their process to have units further below on the area market rate. But many of them, maybe not Mount Hope, do need to have market rates involved in their developments to make the project viable. It is a very expensive place, a market to get in there. We do need private developers to address the housing crises. Some of them want to participate in our program to make some of the units available. I do believe that on the one you mentioned, they thought that would be a viable option, and when they started that project, they were committed to it, and just the math just didn't work well for them as construction costs went up. So they actually were quite supportive with the pivot to what we did. It's much smaller. That's why the dollars are smaller in scale. But to be clear to you as well, and no money actually went to them. That was an announcement. All of our help through this program are construction loans with a forgivable period. That's how they kind of work. But since they hadn't constructed, there was no money flowed to them. You asked about the delta or the difference on that. This program is an ongoing program. We have several projects with partners, both private and the not-for-profit community sector, which continue to tap into this program. So there's not like all of a sudden $18 million became available or $19 million in development. We have a budget. We work towards that. We have an annual allotment. If we believe that we're being more successful than we actually anticipated, the government has been really receptive to us to come in mid-year and say, okay, we need some additional allocations because our monies are being exceeded, which is a great success story. But the not-for-profit sector, yes, they do have the ability to make more units affordable at a rate. It's because their approach is different, and we like working with them, and we like working with co-ops, and we like working with community land trusts. But we're going to continue to work with all groups because all groups are part of the solution.
MLA Chinder.
Thank you, and I agree. I mean, I think that the example of the Mount Hope project demonstrates that. One of the things, and to your point, I understand no money was spent, but that is fiscal capacity. And with respect, I actually don't put any stock in government budgeting anymore at all. Like, I'm being completely honest here. We overspend the budget to the tune of $1 billion every year. What we see in the budget documents that we pour over in the spring has no relationship to what we see in the fiscal updates. The deficits that are announced become surpluses. I don't care about the budget. I don't believe it. But what I do know is that when money is announced, that's fiscal capacity. And, I will say selfishly, Mount Hope is in my district, and we have a line of people out the door, as do every as does every MLA in this province, I would suggest, struggling to afford housing. And they come to us and they say, we see the construction. How do we get on the list? Because they assume that it's going to be affordable. They assume that if this is a government project, that the government is building housing or participating in the building of housing that people can actually afford to live in. And, we know that often that's not the case. And so I guess, my question is, how you say that we work with all partners. I think that's important. One of the things that we've suggested is that you actually prioritize the non-market housing sector. I believe that that's what Nova Scotians think is happening or would like to happen. Is that something that the department is considering? And that can be not market housing providers in partnership. So lots of those folks would say, we're not developers, right? Like we're nonprofits or we're agencies. But we've seen small but many developing success stories around partnerships. If we could prioritize in the procurement process or however these things are decided, because it's all very opaque to me, to quote my friend. If we could prioritize the non-market housing sector, I would suggest that we would get more of these built. Is that something the department is considering?
Deputy Rafuse.
On this particular aspect, I would disagree with you on the opaqueness of this. Our programs are readily advertised or available on our website, and groups come to us. We may not go to groups and say things, so they come to us. So if a community group and a not-for-profit or with a consortium of folks are wishing to develop, then they come to us and we evaluate and we explain to them how we can help, and we do the same with private developers if they're interested in exploring the affordable housing options or programs that we have available. Or even programs that we can help for market housing to be expedited. But I'm not going to say that we're going to prioritize one over the other. I would say, however, that we are making an investment in probably the most affordable housing in Nova Scotia that is available, and that's public housing. And that is an area which we recognize, or the government's recognized. Not only is there a need for more units, and they've made an investment of now over 270 more units, but they've made the decision that those units should be the existing stock, need to be upgraded, they need to be made energy efficient, and accepted the recommendation to go to rent gear to income of those models, which is as you said, is the most.
MLA Chender with 1 minute and 30 seconds.
So 2 quick questions. How many public housing units have actually come online? Because we know lots of other housing that the government's been involved in has. And how long is the wait list? Deputy
Rafuse.
Before I hand it over to Brian to talk about exactly where we're at with our new additions, the wait list right now is around 7,000 units across the province. We have endeavored to make that an accurate list, which I believe it is now. We have done great jobs on increasing our turnover rate, which allows individuals to get into those units faster as they become available. We have reduced our vacancy rate as we upgrade some of those units to allow them to become market. We've addressed some overhousing issues, which makes units more available for families, for long-standing tenants who perhaps don't need the 3 or 4 bedroom units that they have now. So we've kind of addressed that. So we've made great strides on that. And we are on target for both our modular housings that was diverted from the wildfire program and from the new builds that were announced at 222s. The units of the new units are all on track, but the exact timelines I'll leave it to Brian to give to you.
Executive Director Ward, 10 seconds.
So of the 51 modular units from the wildfire, 17 of these units are currently occupied.
Order. Time has elapsed and is now the PC Caucus, and I'll go to MLA Young.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you want to finish what you were Will you explain, Mr. Ward?
Executive Director Ward, continue.
Yes, of the 51 new modular units out of the that were on top of the 222, so the 51 new modular units which are deployed across the province, 17 of these units are currently occupied, and we anticipate that 10 families will be occupying, or an additional 10 families in 2024 and this fall. So the occupancy of those is moving along quickly. The 222 units that had been announced were in the midst of signing contracts on the first set of tenders, where we've placed three of those locations out to tender. So.
MLA Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recognizing there's like no one-size-fits-all when it comes to addressing housing issues, and it's a multi-pronged approach. I think you mentioned we were talking about the backyard suite. It was quite successful. I wonder if you could share some of the feedback you received.
Deputy Rafuse.
Okay, I'm going to ask Michelle to address that question for me.
Executive Director Waye.
Thank you. So, yes, we've received a lot of client feedback about the secondary and backyard suites program. In fact, that client feedback helped us make some modifications last spring to help improve the program as well as the take-up. So initially, the program was offering a cost-matched forgivable loan of up to $25,000, and that the tenants living in the secondary or backyard suite would either have to be under the household income, so an affordability stream, or have a parent-child relationship to support family supports. So based on feedback that we received from clients and staff, modifications were made in April 2024, including we increased the maximum loan amount from $25,000 to $40,000. We broadened the definition of family to include persons with disabilities as well as other extended family members. And we eased administrative requirements by not requiring the initial permits and drawings. So the budget was the first year's budget. The program was launched in November, so we only had a few months really of the year, and we almost spent it. It was $1 million, and we approved $962,000 worth of applications. There continues to be a strong demand for this program. And as I mentioned earlier, to date we've approved 191 applications. So we currently have applications in the pipeline, up 35 applications currently being assessed. So we continue to see a lot of demand for this program.
MLA Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess another prong would be the community housing sector, and it's. I know we talked about this in the past, but maybe you could bring me up to speed on some of the recent investments that would be in that area.
We'll go to Executive Director Waye. Please. Oh, thank you. Your mic wasn't on.
Oh,
okay.
My
It's on now.
Okay. So since 2019, the provincial investments in the community housing sector have increased significantly. In 23-24, over $57 million was committed. $36 million of that was to increase supply, and this included the construction of $25 million for modular housing initiatives for healthcare and skilled trade workers. Also that year, we committed just over $19 million to support new programming for sector growth and sustainability. So this included funding for repairs to 111 Indigenous housing units through the TIWAC program, and transferring provincially owned housing units to the Preston Area Housing Fund. We've had commitments for CHIRP, which is our community housing infrastructure repair program. And this includes funding for community housing organizations through the Community Housing Growth Fund for pre-planning and capacity building activities to allow them to be more robust in the community housing development sector. We On that stream, the Community Housing Growth Fund, this is the initiative that was launched in April 2022, provides funding to community and cooperative housing providers, researchers, and post-secondary institutions to support capacity building, planning, pre-development, and research and innovation for the community housing sector. The department has invested $7 million, and as of June 2024, 96 projects have been awarded through that program.
MLA Young.
No, thank you for your update. I'll pass it out to my colleague, MLA Sheehy-Richard.
MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of just answered a couple of mine, but I wanted to just touch on when we go back and talk about Mount Hope and the special planning areas, and a lot of us are rural MLAs, so I just wonder if we could touch on other initiatives that might be underway to support the development of affordable, and especially the deeply affordable, if you could speak sort of outside of the special planning.
Deputy Rafuse.
I'll start, and perhaps I will hand this off. But yeah, we do have other programs, not only to address affordable assets, but from a municipal planning perspective, which helps compress the timelines. Not only have things happened in Halifax through the panel's work, but if you recall, last year the province put through several legislative changes that expedites the process and streamlines that process for all municipalities. And that in itself not only makes housing a more of affordable, but also can make it as a supply increase. In addition to the work we've done on that, several communities, the first round went to our bigger municipalities, Halifax and CBRM. They received funding from the federal government through their housing accelerator funds that through a commitment to increase land usage and to expedite their permitting process. They did address and help their communities address that aspect of it, which in fact, will over time not only expedite supply, but will help affordability. We do have a number of programs that are directly relate to affordability. Michelle mentioned some of them as well, like our community housing acquisition program, which allows not-for-profits to buy existing stock and to retain it as affordable, because many times those properties can be get out of the not-for-profit sector, and that program allows them to do that. Allows them, our infrastructure program allows them to invest in those properties so that they can be maintained and retained at an affordable rate. And I would be remiss in again mentioning the work we've done on the public housing side of things, which is by definition the most affordable housing that is available in the province. Is deeply affordable, and it really is an opportunity to provide housing or enhance housing for many low-income individuals. We do, through a number of other programs, help address the supply issue. And if you recall, in the housing plan, the research shown to everybody that increasing supply will address affordability, and as well is the fastest way to address it's a way to address the supply and make units available to those who need it. We do that for a number of ways. We haven't been talking about infrastructure yet this morning, but I do want to throw that out to you for consideration, because that allows more supply and stock to become available. If we help municipalities through our infrastructure programs or to co-fund with some of the federal infrastructure programs. That allows, in conjunction with their changes they've made through their permitting process and their bylaws, by putting in water and wastewater pipes that can be connected, or housing can be connected. That allows for those houses to be developed and allows them to address their needs in their communities. So that's some of the ways which we have. I'm going to ask Michelle, have I missed any of our affordable programs?
Executive Director Waye.
I don't think you did. I don't think you missed any of our affordable programs. I think you gave a very good overview of that. We're certainly seeing successes in all of the programs that Deputy Rafuse addressed. The Community Housing Acquisition Program, particularly, that's a nice program to allow community housing providers to purchase existing buildings. Just in August, we recently, through the Community Housing Growth Fund, the Transformation Center that administers the Growth Fund, we released a program to allow community housing providers to obtain the equity they need to buy those properties through the CHAP program. So.
MLA Sheehy Richard.
I am going to pass it to my colleague, MLA McDonald.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to first mention, like, the special, I'm in East Hants. And because HRM was slow and slow and slow, we benefited from that, because people saying, like, I'm not spending 12 months in HRM. So in a way, the point it's gotten faster is actually then made East Hants has got to pick up theirs because that. And I think it's a good thing. I think we need to make sure that we're being responsible, but not making people having to wait 12, 24 months to do what I consider a normal development. So, so as everybody knows, I love facts and numbers. So for me, I want to know how the department is ensuring that the investments that are being made are being utilized and going to the people who need the support now. So can you tell us about the recent program improvements the department has made to ensure that Nova Scotians in housing need receive the supports they're looking for?
Deputy Rafuse.
Well, let me start on that, and I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to talk about one of our programs, which is very in front of our rent supplement program, which allows folks to address the high cost of housing and makes it affordable for them. But rest assured that when we make investments, either through a community housing program or a market development program, that we have the levers to ensure that those individuals live up to their obligations they put into it, either by the number of units or the rates at which they are rates in which they are charging. We do retain a position on those developments that still allows us to recoup the dollars, or that the provincial dollars that may have been put into that development. So we do have those mechanisms. We do have the mechanisms with our municipalities as we provide them funding for infrastructure, that they fulfill those obligations and they follow through on what they are funded to do, and that those infrastructure developments do lead to housing. As you may recall, and more so with the federal government, less so with ourselves sometimes or in the past, but the federal government's funding and infrastructure programs, particularly the new round that comes out, there is a implicit requirement that the investment leads to more housing. And larger municipalities must address or must report that and retain the data through our housing needs assessments and how they've addressed the housing needs and how the infrastructure investments helped increase housing. But I want to leave it to Kathy to talk about the program that many people benefit from, and is probably our single most important program that doesn't address supply, but it does address affordability for individuals in the rental supplement area.
Executive Director Cox-Brown.
Hi, thank you. Just some of the, we are constantly looking at all our programs for improvements. How do we make them more effective, making sure they meet the intended objectives? How do we make them more efficient and also improve equity in each of the programs? So recently we have made some significant changes with the rent supplement. One of the key ones was we lowered the eligibility criteria. We are still focusing on our clients that are most in need, but we've lowered it from a 50% to 40%. We've also looked at making sure that our program is a gap-based program. So what we have implemented some changes to ensure that we had a significant amount of our clients that our rent supplement subsidy was paying more than their actual rent. So we were very much over-subsidizing this group. So what we have is developed some changes in our policy, grandfathering some of the ones that we're paying over to that we will pay just their actual rent. We made changes to the calculations, so now it is your actual rent up to AMR that we're using in the calculation, not just AMR. And with that, we are able to reinvest that in so we can support and serve more clients that are in need. So those are kind of the few things that we're constantly kind of looking at. Efficiency, we've been trying. Last fiscal year, we had a significant backlog. We are now doing 2 to 3 months in our rent supplement programs. The only exceptions is our housing support ones. We are required 1 to 2 weeks that we process those. So our backlog has significantly decreased from what it was, and now we're getting about, I would say about 400 a month in applications is what we've been receiving. It did decrease this month with our announcement of 40%. It has been significantly increased our applications, but we're being able to handle the volume. We only have right now about 460 that are actually with the case manager. So we have another 78 that are being screened by intake. So that's where our wait list is now compared to when it was in the thousands. And again, we get 400 a month is what our application volumes are. So we're able to kind of address them quickly through streamlining the process. One of the other things that we did is we launched a new program. It is a benefit program for survivors of gender-based violence. We launched it in July 19th, again, looking at how we can serve our clients best. We now have about 37 active as of September 23rd. I can tell you that has increased, and that this new program is really it's unique in its way that the first year we do not do income testing. A lot of the requirements that we have on it was based on a lot of consultations with the status of women as well as with transition homes, what would be best. So the first year there's no income testing because we know people in their situation when they're fleeing, they may be making money, they may have assets, but they don't always have access to it. We gave them a flat rate the first year because we just wanted to make it as easy as possible to understand what their benefit would be. And that's, again, looking at what our clients needed that we were serving and that. So, and we constantly are meeting with the transition houses, too, to make sure that this program is working smoothly. And I say that's another thing that when we look at how make our programs more efficient and effective is always constantly talking with our partners like community services. Another change we did to make more equitable is seniors prior were only eligibility was 95% of AMR and their calculation benefit was 95% of AR. We changed it. We treat them equally. It's 100% as well. So we are constantly looking at how we can improve efficiency, how we can meet the needs of the clients.
MLA McDonald with 40 seconds left.
40 seconds. So I guess I should be able to get this answer in. AMR. So for the millions of people listening, AMR equals?
Executive Director Cox-Brown.
AMR is a calculation that we receive from the federal government. It is calculated by then. What AMR is your average.
16 seconds, MLA McDonald.
Of AMR. I don't need the calculation.
Oh.
What does AMR stand for?
Average,
Cox-Brown.
sorry.
Thank you.
And so we will now go back with 10 minutes each and to MLA Braden Clark from the Liberal Caucus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Cox-Brown, I did want to just ask you one thing about rent supplements, just so I can understand the changes that have been put in place. So you talked about actual rent versus AMR, average market rent. So can you just explain for me again what changes were made recently? So is the rent supplement based on the actual rent you're paying, or is it based on AMR or some blending of the two? I just want to make sure I understand exactly how it's determined.
Executive Director Cox-Brown.
Right. For our non-portables, it has always been used, actual rent is used in the calculation. The changes were for our portable portion. What the calculation now, it used to be AMR minus 30% of total household income, the rent guarantee income. Now it is, we use your actual rent up to AMR.
MLA Clark.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Ward, just touching on the public housing, which you gave us a little bit earlier, I think you said 3 locations are out to tender or will be shortly. Could you just give us a timeline, essentially, of when the government expects that the 220 some odd units that are being built, when will those be open and have people living in those units?
Executive Director Ward.
Yeah, so we have the 222 units that was announced last year. So those units, we've been tendering it in groups. So we have our second tender call coming hopefully this month, and then we'll have a third tender call coming up after that. So some of the units will be online in December of 2025, and then the final call up will probably be occupied in probably in the summer of 2028. So those ones are being staggered as we do out the development to make sure that we're getting the right thing in the right location, and we're doing some early planning and design work, and making sure that the site is good and solid. As far as the 51 units that we talked about, those we anticipate those. Some of those are ready for occupancy now. Some of them are occupied. Some of them will be ready for occupancy this fall. And some of the newer eight-plexes that we're building in Western, we have one in Digby that should be available late this year in 2024, and we have substantial completion in 2024 for the others.
MLA Clark.
One of the things about public housing is, along with the new builds, we're trying to build capacity. So instead of just talking about new builds, we talk about capacity building. So one of the big key features right now in capacity building is we've worked hard on our unit turn. We've been able to reduce it since December of 2022 by 25%. So we're turning units faster. We also have between 100 and 120 people per month in public housing across the province that leave public housing. So we're turning those units also. So we've been able to move our vacancy rate down to 2.6%. So it's well below what our 3% policy guideline is. So we continue to work on that. So that's one of the key components here to build capacity in public housing. Another key component for us is we're looking at spaces that we have that in some of our developments across the province that are being used for other uses besides public housing. So besides residential housing, we have some cases where we've had some, in the case of, in the Spryfield area, we had a police station. The police have chose to leave, so we've renovated that unit and put a family back in. So we're looking at those items. We're looking at where we have office space, where we have storage space. So we're internally trying to rebuild capacity within the system that we have, on top of the 272 that the government has announced for us.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. And Mr. Ward, you mentioned that the first of the new 220 units or so would be online. I assume by that you mean occupied December 2025, I think you said. Do you know where those will be? Which location?
Executive Director Ward.
Yes. So the first tender that we put out was Kentville, a set of units in Glace Bay, and one of the units on in Lower Sackville at Old Beaver Bank Road. So those tenders closed a little over a month and a half ago, and we're just negotiating now with the bidders.
MLA Clark.
Thank you for that. Wanted to ask as well about the community housing acquisition program. So that was announced a couple of years ago in 2022 now. I'm just wondering how many units have been acquired through that program to date?
Deputy Rafuse.
I'm going to hand it off to Michelle to answer that question for you.
Executive Director Waye.
Thank you. Yes, the Community Housing Acquisition Program, since it was launched in July 2022, over $25 million has been invested to acquire 478 affordable housing units. 159 of those units, or 33%, are supportive housing units targeted towards the most vulnerable. All have a 30-year amortization, and 79 have a 30-year fixed interest plan, and 83% of the loans have been in conjunction with the Department of Community Services, who are providing operational support to those units.
MLA Clark.
Thank you very much, Ms. Waye. And Mr. Ward, you talked earlier about capacity as it related to public housing, and I think it's an important word, one that I've written down actually in relation to this question about nonprofit and community housing, which I know MLA Chandra was talking about in her first round of questioning, and I agree. I think it's a huge opportunity and maybe underutilized sector in the province. That's kind of a gap there between, we might be talking about public housing and market housing. And I think there's a real opportunity there in the middle. And in talking to people in the sector, I think one of the things that does come up over and over again is capacity. A lot of these organizations are small, volunteer-run organizations. The people who run them don't always have expertise in development, for example, construction, all these things that are quite technical and not easy to just start. And so the two issues are capacity and access to capital is another big one. So I know other provinces, Quebec, I know for one, is considering a program where the government, the province there, would backstop or provide loan guarantees to some in the not-for-profit and community housing sector to help them scale their projects. So, that 10-unit project might turn into a 75-unit project or a 100-unit project, and then we're really getting the ball rolling. So, Deputy, I'm just wondering, I'm giving you not much time here, I know, maybe a minute and a half, but what's your view on access to capital for nonprofit, and does the department have a role to play or could have a role to play to unlock capital so that nonprofits can scale up their operations beyond what they're able to do, generally speaking, today?
Deputy Rafuse with under 2 minutes.
Thank you for that. Yes, I agree with you on the aspect about capacity within that sector, and it is a concern because we're asking a lot from sometimes from very few. But those individuals or those groups that have formed, there's some that are quite robust and actually can make themselves available for new groups. We do have programs where we provide funding to these entities to allow them to develop that capacity, because you're right. A lot of people get into this space because they feel a need to help. And a lot of them may not all have the required skill set. So we will provide them that funding to allow them to build that capacity, to get the right people in the group, connect them with those in the space that can help them out, including developers, because these people don't build. Also, some experience on property management. We did, I think, last year, created an ability for these not-for-profits to tap in to funding to allow them to address their equity portion of these investments. We do have a requirement of a 5% equity investment to access some of our programs. These individuals do have access to our funding, so they can have financing available options to us. Some of it is repayable, some of it is non-repayable. They can also, I believe, have not yet, but soon we'll be accessing our ability to access the
Order. The time has elapsed for the Liberal caucus. We'll move to the NDP caucus with MLA Lachance.
Thank you. So, I think we hear from so many Nova Scotians who are struggling to afford their housing in all different types, right? Whether that's rental housing, whether that's trying to buy a home, and even struggling overall with affordability, so that the cost of home ownership is also a factor. I think one of the most challenging things that we hear about is from seniors, and certainly I hear from seniors in my riding a lot who have been long-term renters and have settled into their retirement years in Halifax, Little Sable Island, with the intent that that they would live out their days here. And with the current a 5% cap that isn't working, and the fixed term leasehold, I mean, I have a lot of seniors who are losing their foothold in this neighborhood. So in particular with the 5% cap, they're also recognizing that their pensions are not going to rise 5% a year. So even if the cap is held, they're really having trouble affording their rentals. I'm wondering what the department is doing in terms of focusing on seniors.
Deputy Rafuse.
We have a number of programs that do help seniors, and specifically some are addressed to seniors. For those individuals that do own their own homes, we have a home repair program that allows them to tap in, that allows them to stay in their homes. Quite frankly, staying in your home a lot of times is the most affordable option available to you. So many seniors do tap into that program, either for needed repairs or accessibility upgrades. Seniors also are eligible for a rent supplement program, and are addressed to that means. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we actually also have a large component of seniors in public housing too, which are, if you look at our tenant mixed ratio, a lot of our existing tenants are seniors. I think right now are on the wait list is probably less so. So there are a number of programs that seniors can access, and some of which are for those who do own, and some of those who do rent.
MLA Lachance.
And so how many seniors are on the wait list for public housing? And, I think just a note, I have been fighting since 2021 to improve the conditions of seniors' public housing in Halifax, Sable Island. And, just, recently spent a couple of days in one of the manors and, wrote follow-up letters to your department. The conditions that people live in public housing are not acceptable. I don't think that any of us would think that the current conditions are okay. And I'd be happy to go on a tour, take people through the ones in my riding any day of the week. But so I think, how many seniors are on the wait list for public housing, and what are investments are being made to actually make that living experience acceptable?
Deputy Rafuse.
I'm going to start that off, and then I'm going to hand it off to Brian for further details. But rest assured that when there are deficiencies in our public housing stock, every attempt is made to address those in as timely fashion as they can. We do have old buildings, and older buildings are harder to take care of sometimes, and especially since for a long time a lot of issues were not addressed. The agency is attempting through their processes as issues are identified, and all tenants have the ability to issue or to notify the management group that there are an issue with their unit or in their common areas, and it will try to be addressed as soon as possible. And I will ask maybe Brian to talk a little bit more about that. But our current wait list, as I indicated, was around 7,000. About half of those are seniors. I don't have that breakdown. Maybe different outside of HRM than it is inside of HRM, but they are predominantly our main group on the wait list.
MLA Lachance, do you wish to hear from Mr. Ward?
I might switch to another question just because of timing, and just to be clear, I feel like I have enough contact with the folks in the seniors matters in my riding to really, I don't think seniors feel like any time they raise concerns that they're addressed, and they're certainly not addressed in a timely fashion. We're talking years at this point for different issues. So the housing plan also talked about ways to explore making home ownership more attainable for Nova Scotians, and so including lease to purchase options. So can you provide an update on that? Are we close to launching a program on lease to buy?
Deputy Rafuse.
Yeah, certainly it is an area of which the housing plan speaks to, and we continue to explore options on that. There is options available through the lease to own option. There are other models that have come forward from areas in the province that they wish for us to consider. Shared equity being one of them, and the like. We are still working on the policy development of that to provide to government. I know that there's definitely interest there to get into to that area. I would be remiss not to mention that we do have a down payment assistance program that does allow folks to get into home ownership, first-time home ownership, and it is, I say, this program has increased immensely over the last number of years as more individuals take advantage of that. But there are other policy options of which we're still exploring.
MLA Lachance.
Can you confirm a timeline on when a policy proposal will be brought forward?
Deputy Rafuse.
I can't confirm that because these types of policy considerations would be subject to government approval. Those are ones of which we would have. I can't. I couldn't confirm a timeline on that.
MLA Lachance.
And turning to the question of folks who need, immediate types of shelter and that transitional type of shelter. So the housing plan talked about investing in 1,000 shelter beds, but we know that shelters aren't homes, that shelter beds aren't homes. But are you confident that, that the current housing plan is making enough non-market housing units available for those with unique needs and lower incomes? Are we getting, I guess the question is, are we getting people moved through that transitional housing, or are they staying housed?
Deputy Rafuse.
Certainly, we work with our partners at Community Services who are primarily responsible for this area. We do work with them on shelter options, particularly our contribution is around locations and funding for the structures themselves, where they provide those services to the individuals that are that require or need the shelter options. I think we have established a much better process now, particularly with our partners in HRM and elsewhere, as we as individuals that go from unhoused to sheltered, to shelter services, to structured, and then eventually we have a stream which allows some of these individuals to go into public housing and the like. So it is much more robust than it has been, and I know that Community Services is endeavoring to address the needs of all those that need I'm going to call it temporary shelter units, either it be a pallet or or the like.
MLA Lachance with 40 seconds left.
Okay, I just want to probe quickly. So this whole idea that supply is going to increase and then there's going to be more people who are going to be able to afford their housing more. So is that saying that you expect rents to decrease and home prices to decrease in Nova Scotia when supply increases?
Deputy Rafuse with 15 seconds.
I can't guarantee that but the laws of supply and demand would tell you that that would be the case. Certainly there would not be the upward pressure on it, or it wouldn't be in a situation where individuals will be price takers. They would have options, and then in itself would
Order.
stabilize pricing.
We will now go to the PC caucus for 10 minutes. MLA McLeod.
Good morning, folks. I'd like to take a step back and to look at this from 10,000 feet. I believe it was last October the 5-year plan was introduced, which looks at our housing strategy, a roadmap for it. What is the progress to date on the key indicators there, and are we on track?
Deputy Rafuse.
Certainly, that 5-year plan made a commitment to either to accelerate or increase housing units by over 40,000 over the 5-year plan. As I said in my opening remarks, there is increased units, housing starts, particularly in HRM over the last year. We are within the next very short while are going to have our commitment to have progress reports on that report. I think there is a good progress on it. I don't know whether or not we had actually made annual commitments, but actually a commitment to get to the end. I stand corrected on that. But there's been great progress on that, and you can see it as you kind of walk around this communities and others, that there has been an appetite at all levels of government to expedite the permitting process. We talk a lot about what they do in Halifax. I was really quite struck last week. I heard a presentation by the town of Truro about what they've done and how progressive they have become in their bylaw use laws and their zoning process, which should, by nature, just accelerate the process. So my feeling is that we are well under the way. We'll have hard numbers soon, I think, on that. But the end goal is to reach that gap that was addressed in the housing need assessment that said our current process versus the need. There had to be an additional 41,000 units or so within the 5-year time frame, and I think we've unlocked the potential for that, and then it's just a matter now of getting them built.
MLA McLeod.
We are in a housing crunch, and we're thinking outside the box, and we've heard of the backyard suites. I was just curious, what other creative solutions are being implemented, and are they homegrown ideas, or are they best practices from other jurisdictions?
Deputy Rafuse.
Certainly, there are other ideas out there, and we're not ashamed sometimes to go out and look at what other people have done that have been successful. And one that does come to mind to me is an option that we've explored, and we're approved to do it in a pilot site, and I'm going to call it the Regent Park model, which is a development out of in Toronto, which was public housing land that needed to be renovated, and those properties were put out for renovation, but also the inclusion of additional affordable or market units on it. So we have received permission to proceed on that on 3 sites across the province and demonstrations. We've announced that they're going to be in Halifax, Wolfville, and Stellarton. The first one that's progressing right now is in Wolfville, where we've already started the process with the municipality and a local community housing provider. where we will look at the existing stock there and that needs to be replaced and how that can be accommodated. What else could come onto those properties in the areas of the market or affordable housing to densify the area and address the housing needs. And in that particular area, it's quite exciting where Wolfville actually has come to the plate and said, we have an adjoining piece of property that we would like to kind of to bundle with this. And so when you look at the capability there, a lot of great options could be explored. And that's just one of the ways in which innovation, innovative ideas are being explored. That one there, as I said, that's not new to us, but we've tailored it, I would say, to our needs. We do as well look at other kind of options of which are maybe at one time maybe more popular. There's the co-op option is a strong one. And I think there's options to move in co-op housing more so than we have when we have a mandate to do that. And as well with land trusts, which is a good way for some communities to get into a model where they can have a more connected stake in the housing development in their communities.
MLA McLeod.
I realize this is a great province and there's 55 ridings here, but I do have a pointed question, and my constituency office is in Pictou, and just down the road is the old municipal building. There is a project going on there. I believe it's the Nova Scotia Cooperative Council leading it. I believe there is a component of affordable housing there. I was wondering what your involvement is in that project specifically, and if you happen to know a timeline there.
Deputy Rafuse is looking like he wants to pass this to Executive Director Waye. So I'll go to Executive Director Waye.
Just need to pull. Yeah, I might have to get back to you. What was it was the Appleseed one?
MLA McLeod.
I apologize. I should have mentioned the name of the project, Stonehouse Manor.
Executive Director Waye.
Great. Yes, that is on my list. We have supported that we have provided $1 million for 14 units. 10 will be affordable. So that project was approved this fiscal. So were you asking about the timeline?
Yes,
MLA McLeod.
Yes, please.
Executive Director Waye.
Apologies, I'm sorry. Yes, I can get back to you with the specific timelines, but since it was approved this year, it's in the pre-development, pre-construction stage, so it would most likely be a year or two down the road, but I can get back to you with that.
MLA McLeod with just over 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to pass it over to MLA Taggart.
MLA Taggart.
Thanks, Chair. My question is going to be to Ms. Brown. There's been a lot discussed here this morning about the special planning areas, and I think it's pretty reasonable to say that it's been quite successful. Maybe there's some things that some folks don't think it's working perfectly, but it appears to be moving housing ahead significantly. So, can you give me a bit of an update on the implementation of the Deloitte recommendations?
Deputy Rafuse.
I'm sorry, I thought you were addressing Mr. Brown. So on the Deloitte recommendations, I can certainly give you an update on that. So obviously, the report did recommend that we do things like the executive panel and HRM, which we have done. It has recommended that the permitting process needs to be streamlined and modernized. And elements of that have either been done through the panel or other municipalities have done it with the use of their housing accelerator fund, which allowed those processes to be kind of streamlined or maybe even automated or electronic forms of public consultation or consultation. There's an element on that on the form which is the trusted partner program, which would allow for certain individuals that were part of either a development approval or like an engineer or an architect, is that there would be no need for the municipality to kind of recheck their work because they are a trusted partner. That work is progressing. HRM has a mandated timeline to complete theirs. We have enabled that throughout the province so that individuals...
Order. The time has elapsed for the questions, but it's back to you, Deputy, if you want to have some closing remarks provided.
No closing remarks. I just want to say thank you to the committee for your questions, and we look forward to being back probably. And I know we had a number of takeaways, and we'll endeavor to get those to you as soon as possible.
I thank you, and I thank all the witnesses. And Mr. Stuckless, if you want to say anything, now would be the time to say it, since you're the only person who did not speak. Thank you for being here. Does the committee wish to have a recess, or we'll just wait until our witnesses leave?
Probably best to recess. It just makes it easier.
It is best to recess, because then we can have a health break as well.
2 minutes?
So 2-minute break. So, I'm supposed to say, committee is now in recess. I'll call the meeting back to order. So on the agenda, and I think the emails were sent to everyone with regards to the new Department of Emergency Management. So on our list of topics, we have emergency preparedness. So I will need a motion to approve the change in the witness to go from who we just had as the Department of Municipal Affairs to the Department of Emergency Management. So is anyone willing to put that motion on the floor for the committee? MLA Nolan, you want him to say it formally?
No,
It's been recorded, so therefore the motion's on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion's passed. I see the Auditor General here. Is she to?
No, I just asked her to come up in case there was anything.
Okay. You're here in case there's some questions. So does the committee have any questions at this time for her? Seeing none, I say that our meeting is to be arranged for December 4th and 11th.
You're missing someone. December meeting.
So we're on December meetings.
Yeah, I'm on
now.
December meetings. Would you like the mic, MLA McDonald?
No, I apologize.
Thank you.
Oh. Should have it.
So the meeting's being arranged for December 4th and 11th. Does the committee want to schedule a meeting for December 18th, given that we know where Christmas is how many days away?
A week.
7.
So I've opened the floor for discussion with regards to the December meetings. You do not wish to, MLA McDonald, can you, rather than nod, MLA McDonald?
I'm fine with December 4th and 11th and not going on the 18th.
Everyone is in favor of that? Contrary-minded? So we will not have a meeting on December 18th. And the 2024 PAC annual report for the committee has been circulated. Members have any changes? So that's just going to ask for a motion to approve the report. MLA Young.
Yeah, I move to approve the annual report of the PAC 2024.
The motion's on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion's passed. Meetings related to the AG follow-up reports. There was a discussion at last week's meeting regarding whether it was necessary to hold a pre-hearing briefing for meetings related to the AG follow-up report. I know it's not been the practice to hold pre-hearing briefings in advance of the related AG follow-up report. So as the committee receives a briefing from the Auditor General, when the annual follow-up report is presented to committee, a decision will need to be made for scheduling purposes. So we just need a motion, and we want to open the floor for discussion with, going forward from here on, because we had, as you know, last week's and this week's, there was no pre-hearing. And I know some had brought it up that they prefer to have them. So I was talking with Ms. Langell, and she said she just wants to have it on record as to what the wishes of the committee is. MLA,
With regard to follow-up reports.
with regard to follow-up reports. MLA Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should just continue as we have been. So I think with the follow-up reports, I don't see any need for a pre-hearing briefing, given we have a briefing earlier on the topic already. So it feels like a bit of duplication to me. So I would argue that we should just leave things as they are and proceed as we have been on this.
In that argument, could you put the motion on the floor?
I believe maybe, does anyone else want to speak? I could after, but I think Emily Taggart had a...
MLA Taggart?
Thanks, Chair. So I do want pre-meetings. The follow-up report is generally, if I understand correctly, follow-up to a meeting we had often like a year previous or that sort of thing. And I'd like to be understanding what I don't like to go to a meeting without some kind of briefing. Now, somebody suggested that we could get our staff to do that. Well, I'm not sure. I don't get an opportunity to ask staff questions in the sense that I could ask the Auditor General questions. So I would prefer to have the pre-meeting briefing on any subject that, in this case, the follow-up reports prior to the public meeting, so that I can ask the AG questions or her staff, so that I fully understand, you know, the entire picture.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? I will go to the AG for some input. MLA Young.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just historically, did we have briefings for the follow-up reports? Like, for some reason, I thought we did for a couple of different topics, right? Like, I see value in the input from the AG prior to the reports, but perhaps I'll let Ms. Adair.
Ms. Adair.
Thank you. So the follow-up report was released in May of this year, so about 6 months ago. As soon as it was tabled, we would have had an in-camera briefing of the details of what's in the follow-up report. So we're now roughly 6 months later. I think the chapter is quite well laid out, so you can easily find the recommendations and the status of those that have not been implemented for the departments and agencies that have been suggested to come in. And just as a reminder, it's Public Works to come in on the bridge audit, the 2019 bridge audit, where 6 of 7 recommendations have not been implemented. Build Nova Scotia and Nova Scotia Health are on the list to come in on the QE2 New Generation project, where 0 of 4 recommendations were implemented. And then there's Nova Scotia Liquor Corp, where 6 of 11 were not done, and then early childhood education and early childhood development, where 6 of 9 were not implemented on the pre-primary program. So those are the departments in question. We would have given you an in-camera briefing, but it was 6 months ago.
MLA Young.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just with respect to new members and stuff on the committee, and it's been quite some time since we did have a briefing. Like, I would like to be brought up to speed with the Auditor General, like to have an in-camera hearing.
MLA Clark.
I think I've lost, but that's okay. I just think there's better uses of our time, to be honest, and of the Auditor General's time and of the Auditor General's office. We have a limited amount of meeting times, obviously, throughout the year. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think the government members have made their intentions clear on this, but I don't see the value of it. I think we should proceed as we have been, but I'll leave it up to government members if they want to make a motion on the topic.
Is there a motion to be placed on the floor? MLA Taggart.
I move that we have a pre-briefing meeting with the Auditor General prior to any follow-up reports.
Motion's on the floor. Any discussion? MLA McDonald.
Just to be clear, MLA Taggart, in the event that the Auditor General is able to do more than one in that, she wouldn't have to do one per it. For if she was able to do more than one into a briefing that spanned multiple, your motion would not prelude that, correct?
MLA Taggart.
Well, you know, I would agree with that, provided it was that meeting was going to be in relatively shortly after the briefing meeting, but not if it's going to be 3 or 4 months after. No, I wouldn't support that. But if it's going to be within the month, then yes, I'd be okay with that.
Do you have any response, Ms. Adair?
Whatever the committee wants to do. Yeah.
So the motion is on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Motion's passed. So our next meeting date will be October 16th in camera, Office of the AG, pre-hearing briefing, and on agricultural support programs. I now look to close the meeting. Meeting adjourned.